Bring in, though, right now, Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, who served in the George W. Bush administration. Secretary Rice, it's very interesting. We had Nick Kristof on, and Nick, of course, New York Times columnist, and it was the 20th anniversary of Iraq. And what Nick Kristof said is, I want to talk about PEPFAR. Because the Bush administration, this is the most successful government program in my lifetime. 25 million lives saved. Can you talk about how extraordinary this program is and how you all achieved that success?
Yes, well, I'm grateful to the American people who have supported this program for 20 years. We have to remember that President Bush made an appeal to the American people. I'll never forget that night when he said, to whom much is given, much is expected. And so I think that what we have to focus on here is that the United States of America is at its best when it leads from power, which we have plenty of, but also principle and compassion. And the 25 million lives that were saved. And we have to realize it's not just the 25 million lives that were saved. Think of all the orphans that were not created because their parents were saved. Think about the mother-to-child transmission that was a part of this, that saved the lives of pregnant women who were giving birth to children. I think we have to realize what a terrible situation this was 20 years ago. And President Bush called us together in the Oval Office. Some progress had been made in the ability to make antiretrovirals extend life. I remember he said, is it worth it to just extend life even if you can't cure? And I said, Mr. President, my mother died of breast cancer, but she died when I was 30, not when I was 15. Extending life matters. And so I think the American people have reason to be proud of this. And I'm sorry that it's gotten caught up in this political struggle. I hope that the questions of those who are concerned can be answered. But this program has to be preserved.
Madam Secretary, just to take people back to the time when you and President Bush worked on it, I know I heard about it in my church. I heard about it in the Christian community, the evangelical community. AIDS in Africa went to the top of the list for a lot of evangelicals. They believed that they had a duty as Christians to help those who were suffering the most in Africa. Can you talk about how that impacted George W. Bush, how that impacted other members of the administration, that they felt like they had to do this because their faith demanded nothing less?
Absolutely. I'm a minister's daughter. I'm a Presbyterian minister's daughter. And when there are hurting people in the world, your Christian conviction is that you have to do what you can to help. And in fact, it had been in many ways the faith-based and evangelical community that were the strongest advocates of this with President Bush. When we first came into office, he talked about how much his friends in the Christian community wanted us to do something about AIDS. It absolutely united people across religious faiths. It united people across political lines. But we shouldn't underestimate the degree to which this was, as I said, from the Bible, to whom much is given, much is expected. And President Bush actually quoted that in our last meeting in the Oval Office. And so America's at its best when it is acting in this compassionate way. But I think we as deeply religious people are also at our best when we're acting on our faith. And I felt very much that day that I was acting on my responsibility as National Security Advisor, but I was acting from a place of deep faith. You may remember in that op-ed that the president wrote, he mentioned Mike Gerson and quoted Mike Gerson, one of the most faithful people that I know. And after his death, we very much thought about the spirit of Mike Gerson as being at the core of this program. And so all the lives that have been saved, all the lives that will be saved, all the kids who won't be orphans. This is America at its best. We need to continue.
And what an extraordinary legacy for you and the president, but also for Mike Gerson. What an extraordinary legacy. We talk about the 25 million lives that have been saved, the 65, 70 million people who have been reached with help and assistance. Let me close with you, Madam Secretary. We're so grateful for you to be here because this is such a critical issue. Can you just lay out for members of Congress and people in the administration what's at stake here if this reauthorization doesn't pass?
Well, what is at stake here is a program that has saved 25 million lives and affected countless others. I would just ask that we also remember that throughout Africa and through much of the world, people look at this as America. They look at this as the American people. And to not continue, to not make this program able to continue in its fullest way, that doesn't reflect well on the soul of America. And I have to tell you, one of my fondest memories was standing in Uganda, listening to AIDS orphans, who now wouldn't be orphans, singing God Bless America. I hope people will think of that.
Let's hope so. Former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, thank you so much for being with us. We so greatly appreciate it.
Greatly appreciate it.